had been a long day for the engines on the island of Sodor, and at last the day's work was done. Oliver was receiving attention at the sheds, and he was to be stabled with the mainline engines that night. The bigger engines were pleased to see Oliver. Since the holiday season had begun, they had not seen much of their Great Western friends. "I hope you're not being run into the ground on the Little Western?" asked Henry. "Oh, no, no, no. They look after me and duck just fine," replied Oliver happily. James was feeling a little hot and bothered. "I just wish we weren't so busy throughout the summer." Donald and Douglas disagreed. "Me and Dougie would rather be kept busy than standing around being idle," said Donald with feeling. "Hey, if we weren't busy we'd end up like we did on British Railways," added Douglas. Henry and James laughed. They understood what the twins meant, but they knew the Fat Controller would never dispose of them. But Donald, Douglas and Oliver thought differently. They had had to suffer the treatment from British Railways and the threat of extinction. They never took for granted their new lease of life working on the North Western Railway. "I'm sure you have nothing to worry about," chortled James. "You three won't need to plan an escape again." Soon the subject of the three engines' escape to Sodor began, but as Oliver reminisced about running away, Emily steamed in. As she rested, Oliver broke away from his story and looked at the Sterling single. "Emily, how did you escape here?" inquired Oliver curiously. All the engines fell silent. No one had really bothered to ask Emily before. She was much older than all the engines, and she never had a working career under British Railways, let alone the famous LNER. "Ugh, I wouldn't want to bother you," Emily replied modestly. The engines pleaded until at last the Emerald engine gave in, and this was the story she told them. Long ago, before the LNER took ownership of the lines throughout the east of the United Kingdom, the Great Northern Railway took order of a special class of locomotive designed for express passenger work. Designed by Patrick Stirling, their appearance made them stand out by a single pair of large driving wheels, which led to the nickname 8-footer. But the engines much preferred the name Stirling Singles. Emily was the last to be built, and was part of the 1894 series. Coaches back then were small wooden-bodied vehicles, and Emily had no trouble departing London-bound from New York at high speeds. But things quickly changed. By 1899 withdrawals began, and by 1916 Emily found herself hiding from the scrapman's torch. But the powerful single found refuge in a carriage shed, and was protected by the foreman. "You'll be safe in here. They won't find you, I promise," reassured the foreman. "Oh, thank you, sir. I hope this isn't the end," she murmured sadly. "Don't you dare think like that," ordered the foreman. "You must keep your chin up." Over the course of a year, more powerful engines took charge of the trains. The foreman decided to name Emily after his wife. She would come to comfort the single and keep her brass fittings clean. Emily adored her name. It was much better than being referred to as a number. More years passed, and the newly formed LNER soon became suspicious. Rumours soon spread that a Stirling single had escaped the cutter's torch. Indeed, one had. The first of the class, number 1, had been preserved, but the LNER had written proof in their books that Emily had not been scrapped. "They're after me, sir," cried Emily. "They'll cut me up for sure." "Not if I can help it," insisted the foreman. Emily's tender was sent to an engine shed. Old tenders were often used as snowplows or ash disposal bunkers. The foreman hoped this would throw the LNER's railway board off the scent, but as a precaution, the foreman had Emily hidden behind some coaches. "There's nothing more we can do," sighed the foreman. "We can but pray for a miracle." Soon an inspector came to the carriage shed. The foreman greeted him with an innocent expression. "Documents state a Stirling single has not been disposed of," the inspector said lordly. "Rumour has it the locomotive is stored here. Is this true?" Emily held her breath. She didn't make a sound. The foreman was luckily called away. He left the inspector doubting his unanswered question. He began to walk towards the carriage shed. Emily was close to tears. It seemed she would be discovered and her future lay shattered in front of her. Just as the inspector entered the shed, he was called back by the foreman. "What is it?" asked the inspector crossly. "They've found the tender of the missing Stirling at King's Cross Shed," announced the foreman. "Perhaps your documents are wrong." "Impossible," snarled the inspector. but he couldn't argue with the facts presented to him, and he slunk away annoyed. The LNER soon dismissed the thought of Emily existing and concluded that human error was to blame. They calculated that Emily must have been scrapped along with the other members of her class, as their tenders were used for the same purpose at different engine sheds. "Oh, sir," wailed Emily, "you saved me. I can't thank you enough." "You're welcome, Emily," smiled the foreman, "but we're not out of this yet." As time went on and World War II broke out, Emily experienced more close calls. Some were friendly workmen who were trusted to keep Emily a secret and promised to do so. Others were inspectors, and like before, it was sheer luck that kept them at bay. But soon the hardest ordeal came. As the Second World War came to an end, the foreman was beginning to tire out. He was at the right age to retire, but he couldn't afford to leave Emily without a guardian. He didn't want his efforts to be in vain or to let Emily down. The foreman had no choice but to inform his replacement and his colleagues. They all vowed to protect Emily and to keep her safe. Emily was very grateful for all the foreman had done, and couldn't help but shed a tear as he left Emily, still with a very uncertain future. As the railways became nationalised, news broke out that the foreman had passed away. Emily made herself a promise. "I've come this far. I won't let the foreman down," she said with determination. "His memory will live on through me." Emily's new guardians kept to their promise, but one day they were caught out by surprise. A newly painted B-12 steamed into the carriage shed. He was shocked to find Emily hidden in the shed. "Who are you?" he cried. The engine and his crew had to be told the secret. The B-12 smiled. "So you're the missing Sterling?" Emily chuckled. "Hey, I am. Dinna tell me you've heard about me." "Of course," replied the B-12. "When I was put into service you were constantly talked about. Ghost stories have been created about you. The Sterling single that escaped the cutter's torch and haunts the East Coast main line." Emily laughed. She hadn't laughed in years. Speaking to a fellow engine uplifted her confidence. "I'm no ghost," she said, "but I want to live on and prove I can survive." "And so you shall," beamed the B-12. Over the course of a year, the B-12 came to see Emily as often as he could. He kept her company and informed her of how the railways were changing. Modernisation was beginning to take shape, and the age of steam was passing over. But sadly, the B-12 was reallocated to another shed, and Emily never saw him again. By 1960, word had gotten round that 2 Caledonian engines had escaped the North Western Railway. The workman looking after Emily had been informed that the Fat Controller had no plans to abolish steam on his network. "This could be Emily's chance to escape," whispered a workman. "I'll write a letter to Sir Topham Hatt immediately," replied another. Plans were soon in motion, and the Fat Controller arranged a top-secret visit to see Emily. The workman cleaned and polished Emily from smoke-box to cab. "Do you think he'll save me?" asked Emily hopefully. "Oh, we'll just have to wait and see," sighed a workman. "But we must have you looking your best to impress him." "I've waited so long for this day," Emily said quietly. Unbeknownst to British Railways, the Fat Controller inspected Emily. He realised there would be a lot of work to be done to restore her to working order. 44 years stored in a carriage shed had taken its toll. Worse still was that Emily's tender had been scrapped, and a replacement was extremely rare to find. The Fat Controller spoke kindly to Emily. "You are a significant find," he began. "A lot of work is needed, but I am sure you'll prove to be a really useful engine if given the chance." He paused briefly. "Financially, I am incapable of buying and restoring you at the present time. I have taken ownership rather unexpectedly of 2 Caledonian engines," said the Fat Controller. He turned to the workman. "Keep her safe and hidden just a little while longer. I will save her, but in good time." The Fat Controller tipped his hat and returned home. Emily felt disappointed, but she fully understood the Fat Controller's reasons. Years went by, and the sound of snorting steam engines were replaced by the sounds of purring diesels. The threat of being discovered grew again. Emily became very distressed. It had been years since she had last seen the Fat Controller, and soon she began to worry that he had forgotten about her. But the Fat Controller hadn't forgotten. He had recently rescued Oliver and Toad from scrap, and now safe on his railway, their restoration came first. Emily's situation soon progressed from bad to worse. The carriage shed that had been Emily's hiding place for many years was going to be knocked down, and the coaches that were once stored alongside Emily were to be replaced by DMUs until the building was demolished. The workmen couldn't protect Emily any longer. Time was running out. One day a DMU arrived. They were shocked to see Emily there. Again the workmen were forced to tell the engine and its crew of Emily's existence. Emily thought the DMU would reveal all, but she was pleasantly surprised. "We'll look after you," comforted the DMU. "Your secret's safe with us, promise you the end." Emily was very thankful but confused. She'd never met an engine quite like this before. "I'm Blue, and I'm Belle, and together we're Bluebell," said the sisters together. "Nice to meet you," replied Emily. Emily once again enjoyed the company. Bluebell was very kind and fended off any diesel engines that came too close. But one evening, a Class 47 drew into the yard and coupled up to Emily. The Sterling single cried out, "Help! Help!" Emily's wheels groaned as she was pulled out of the shed for the first time in 55 years. Emily's distress call came unanswered until she was brought face to face with the Fat Controller. "There's nothing to fear, Emily," he soothed. "You are safe. You are now a Northwestern engine." Emily was speechless. But how?" she stuttered. "British Railways had to be informed of your whereabouts," explained the Fat Controller. "They saw your escape as a remarkable achievement, and agree you more than deserve to be saved after all this time." Emily beamed proudly. She had never felt so happy in years. Bluebell was very sad to see her go, but were relieved that Emily was now safe. She was taken to Crewe Works, where it took them years to restore Emily to her former glory. A new tender had to be built from scratch, and the blueprint of which was borrowed from the National Railway Museum in York. Sterling No. 1 was told of Emily's fight for survival, and news soon reached Emily that a reunion would be planned in the near future. Emily was returned to steam and put on trial. She performed faultlessly and was just what the Fat Controller needed for his semi-fast suburban trains. She even proved to be a reliable mixed traffic engine and is capable of hauling any train given to her. With her second chance, Emily has proven to be a really useful engine. The engines were mesmerised by Emily's story. "You had to fight for survival all that time," gasped Henry. "Hey, it makes our escape sound like nothing," puffed Donald. Emily smiled happily. "The memories of those who saved me live on through me. I go on to work each day for them all." The engines were amazed. All of them found a huge, deep respect for Emily, the Sterling single.